Hi there. Okay, today we're going to talk about functions. So functions are an integral part of any programming language, and they are just as important in JavaScript. They allow us to create code so that instead of having like just giant messes of code, we can kind of take the parts of our code that we need to use over and over again, and we can turn them into a kind of like a mini program and call them whenever we need to. So a lot of times we kind of have like a separate file that has all of our functions and include those in our web pages and call those functions whenever we need them. Many functions deal with string inputs and formatting, things like that. So there's lots that you can do with functions. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First of all, how do we create a function in JavaScript? And basically, a function in JavaScript is very similar to a variable. Instead of saying var, you say function and then the name of the function. So let's call this my function. Okay, this isn't the best name for a function because we want our function to be something that says something, right? That kind of defines what it is that we're actually doing. Now the next bit for our syntax is we need to have parentheses. So sometimes you'll see the parentheses that are empty, and other times you'll see parentheses with parameters inside of them. Okay, so here's an example of a parameter. Now, if I'm doing a simple function such as saying hello, I might not need a parameter at this point. In addition to our parentheses, we also have curly braces, and those curly braces will designate the code block that we're going to use for our function. So always a good practice to put a comment in here. This function will output hello. Okay, so what are we going to do here? All we're going to do is we're going to say hello. And I've got my function. I'm going to save it. And let me change my settings so that these will not pop up. Now, if I click run, nothing happens. Nothing happens because this is a function, right? So one of the definitions of a function says I have to call that function. I have to pick up the phone inside my program and say, okay, I need you to run this function now. So to call the function, all we do, it's very simple. We just put the name of the function and we need those parentheses. So if our parentheses are accepting parameters, then we would need to pass it a parameter here. But if they're not, then we just put empty parentheses. Now let's go ahead and run it. And here we go. Now it's working because I have a function call. Now I could technically use this over and over again in my program. So this is again a great tool if you're constantly needing to find yourself in a situation where you're needing to do the same thing more than once. All right, so let's take a look at putting in something like a parameter. So let's say we say my name. So I'm passing a parameter called my name. So what I want to do here is I want to put something in my, basically my string of my name, and I'm going to run this, and it's not going to work. Okay, I'm going to edit my alert box here. So I'm going to say hello space, well, hello plus my name plus, so I'm concatenating this. So ideally it should say hello space and then the name that I'm passing. So let's see what happens. I click run And so here we go, hello Dina. So if I wanted to constantly be calling this function with new names, I could do so. So that is a way that you might want to work with a parameter. Now, parameters can be many different things. You can use numbers, you can use strings, you can use pretty much any type of data that you want to pass to the function. Okay, so we already talked about how to return value. Oh, sorry. Let's talk about returning values from a function. And in this case, we are going to pass it some numbers. And let me create a new function. So I'll go ahead and type this out real quick. So num1, num2, new num equals num1 plus num2. Put some spaces in there if you'd like. And we've created a new number, so we want to return the new number back to the place that called it. So I'm going to go ahead and put add 2, 1, and 3. And I'm going to save it, run it. It's going to say hello. Now, it's not doing anything because we aren't necessarily saying it to output anything. So what we can do is we can actually do something like alert, and we can call that function from within our alert. So instead of passing a string or a variable in here, we can just pass the whole function. So let's see if that works. Hello Dina, and here we go with our number 4. So 1 and 3 is 4, that's correct. So this is something that you might want to do with your returning values. Now there is a shortcut to this. So instead of going through this whole process, you might have said, well, why can't I just do something like return number 1 plus number 2? So you don't necessarily need to assign it a variable. All we're doing is we're just sending it a value. So if you caught that, good for you. You're kind of seeing how JavaScript can work in ways that we might be able to simplify the process of things. So let me go ahead and we'll try some different numbers here, 6 and 8, and run those. Hello, and 14. So exactly the same thing. Okay, are you ready for the code challenge? Let's go ahead and create a JavaScript function that asks for user inputs of 2 numbers and then alerts the larger number within the function code block. So you're going to need to use some sort of if statement to make this easy for yourself. And you can do everything within the function code block, or if you want, you can call it with you can return the value and output it that way, whichever works best for you. Okay, good luck. Take some time, push pause, and try and figure that one out. Okay, everyone, hopefully you got that to work. Here is my solution. Again, there are many different solutions that you might have come up with for this. So what I did was I call my function called larger num. I'm not passing any parameters. I've got a variable, a local variable called number 1, and I'm using parse int to make sure that this is coming through as an integer, and I'm using prompt, which is going to pop up a window that says please enter a number, please enter another number. Let me change that. So I'm doing the same thing for number 2, and then I have an if else if block here. So if number 1 is less than number 2, I'm going to alert the number is the larger number. Else if number 2 is less than number 1, then number 1 is the larger number. And if that still isn't the case, then I'm going to do an else if number 2 equals number 1. Then I'm going to say your numbers are the same. I might want to put another else in here that basically will catch anything else that falls outside of that range and just, say could not compute or something along those lines. But we'll go ahead. That's something that as you code, you might want to keep adding more kind of validation checks in to make sure your program works. So once you've got your program written, you need to test it for multiple things. So First, I'm going to run it. I'm going to put a bigger number in first and a smaller number in second. Okay, 10 is the larger number. That's correct. I'm going to reverse that. So I'm going to put in a smaller number and then a bigger number. 12 is the larger number, so that one works. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in the same number, 5 and 5. Your numbers entered are the same. Now let's see what happens if I put in something like a string. Nothing happens, right? So I'm going to put in an else, and then I'm going to say alert, sorry, could not compute. Could not compute. All right, let's see now. Let me test this case. Okay, I'm going to run it again and make sure it works first. 3 and 5. 5's the larger number. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to say yes, no, sorry, could not compute. So see, I'm catching that. I want to try one more thing. If I say yes and yes, could not compute. Okay, good. So it's catching that parse int, and it's saying, hey, you know what? This isn't a valid variable. So this is an example of a function that you might want to use. This could be like a game. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be like a real exciting game, but it could be a game, and you could put in something that says, would you like to play again? You know, and then just kind of keep them going through and doing this until they exit out. Okay, so if you were able to understand all that, definitely play around with functions. The more functions that you can write, the better. Test yourself with sending parameters, doing return statements, and doing things like this to kind of make your code work and function a little bit better. Great. Thank you. Bye.